Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. So the conversation for today is, of course, looking at the safety element as well as the mental health element of the returning workforce into the office space. Whether or not the employees and employers have the necessary measures to deal with what is to come. We want to look at the psychological and psychiatrical aspect of this. So joining me is a psychologist, Hetal Doshi, here to talk more about the impact of the health-related matters when it comes to employees, employers' affairs. Welcome to the show, Hetal. Let's do a quick recap into what you do right now.
Thanks for having me here, Ibrahim. I'm an organizational psychologist, and what we do is that we are gatekeepers for organizations who want to implement a strategy, but also want to consider the impact on people. So our job as organizational psychologists is to make sure that whatever the business strategy is, it actually creates the right impact on the people. So we typically are the gatekeepers between the business and to the people.
There is also this element of the employees now returning to the workforce. We want to try to understand a little bit better about the direct challenges and the direct risks that is lying ahead for both the employees as well as the employers. What should we be looking out for, particularly when the conditional MCO is well on its way of being implemented right now?
Yeah, I think some of the more important things to think about are definitely, number one, focusing on the outcomes. What does the organization really want? And to keep it principle-based. So some of the organizations that are doing this really well, they keep 3 principles that are non-negotiable with regards to the outcome. For example, safety, performance, employee well-being. So they're super clear about the outcome. Every decision that they make is geared towards that. Obviously, so organizational outcomes is really important. And the second one would then be the well-being of people and their ability to meet those demands. I think these are the 2 things to constantly be vigilant about. Nothing else really, just these 2.
Yeah, so the notes that was given to me prior to starting this interview was talking about real work versus fake or, not uninterested in work. What's the story there?
I guess it's a discernment with regards to whether employees are actually performing at work, wanting to perform at work and are performing, versus coming up with excuses to not be able to perform or not be able to return back to work. So with this, I think the only way to be able to dissect between the 2, whether you're actually performing and interested to perform versus not interested to perform and coming up with excuses to perform, is by having a very close relationship. I have not had too many encounters with my clients about situations like this. So I'm not sure where it's really coming up in Malaysia. I'm not really sure where that currently exists and whether it actually even exists. So there are 3 things that you could be doing over here. Number 1, make sure that you check in with the person directly, okay? And ask very direct questions. Do you or do you not want to be working for the organization? So just do very close-ended questions. The more open it is, the more drama you're going to get. So do you or do you not want to continue working? The second thing is, are you able to perform up to the expectations, or are you experiencing any real difficulties? Number 3, can I help you? And number 4, what are the reasons, if you are unable to come to work, what are the major reasons you are unable to come to work? And lastly, if you are unable to come to work and I need you to come to work, what would be a very fair compromise? Given that obviously a business needs to have commercial gains as well. If you are unwilling to come to work, but I need you to come to work, what is a fair trade over here that we could possibly engage in going forward? So I think really having a close connection with your employees, but also asking very direct, upfront, yes, no kind of questions would be very important to be able to discern.
There's also this issue of the legality aspect coming in. We have the Employment Act, we have the Companies Act, we have all these things in place. And more often than not, we have businesses tend to resort to law first before trying to engage with the employees. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, I think you should be using the law as the last option. Many things can be resolved through meaningful conversation. And why should organizations bother with meaningful conversations is because, again, it comes back to the outcome. Organization obviously has the outcome of, I want to perform, I want to get my revenue in order, and I want my people to be well. So if that's the outcome that you want, then obviously the last resort will be to throw in legalities, because once you throw legalities in, there's going to be a lot of noise in the organization. And we all know that this noise is going to take the organization back a few steps rather than just being able to focus on the outcome. So absolutely, I don't think that should be the first resort. And majority of the time, even lawyers would say that would be the last resort.
Yeah, let's take a look into the SOPs or the standard operating procedures that are currently in place. There's plenty to work with, and then there's federal and there's state. People watching this show normally reside in the big towns, Penang, JB, Selangor. Each of these three states also have their own SOPs. And while we want to have the employers speak clearly and communicate clearly to the employees about the SOPs in place, sometimes the employers themselves aren't too familiar with the SOPs that are currently in place. How do we manage this kind of bombardment of SOPs with communicating clearly with what is required by the law and by the state and federal?
Yeah. Ibrahim, one of the most interesting things that we found out when we interviewed about 20 MNCs over here is that while they are complying absolutely with the requirements of the law, depending on which state they are in, they actually are going even further than that by choosing to focus on the very best practice. So there are organizations that basically, okay, fine, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but even higher than that, what is my best practice? Because let's not forget, the government cares about what the government cares about. The business owner needs to care about their own business. So they are choosing a lot of things like, for example, even before the MCO was announced, many organizations had already begun to practice work from home, maybe 2 to 4 to 6 days prior to that. So with regards to safety standards, because the consequences are so high on the employer per se, I can see that majority of them are scrambling to find out what is the very best practice. The consequences are so dire to them that it warrants them to want to practice at the highest level that they possibly can. The consequences could potentially be death. So for them, they take this as the highest priority. That's what I'm seeing with my clients. I'm not sure whether we're seeing it all around, but I can only speak for the people that I've interviewed, the people that I've spoken to. That's the aspiration.
All right. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Hetal of O Psych. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Notepad. I have with me Hetal. She is from O Psych, the CEO there, and we're talking about the impact of employees returning back to work and the employers asking the employees to return back to work. There's a lot of dimensions here moving forward, and we are exploring all the kind of impacts that it has on the psychological aspect as well as the psychiatrical aspect, actually, of these employees returning back to work. Anyway, Hetal, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. I want to explore some elements of work from home culture. Large companies like PNB, for instance, have introduced a permanent work from home feature. We've seen how this has an interesting impact on the employees of PNB because they are indeed saying things like they embrace this kind of culture. They don't see why they need to go back to work. Everything is online. In fact, for example, this interview is done, via Skype, using a DSLR, whatever, right? Everything can be done with a substitution if we really look out for that kind of substitution. But there are other businesses that require employees to be at work quite physically, those in the logistics business, for instance, and many other services that require, employees to be at work. How do you try to, encourage those companies that can actually leave the employees at home to do so. And perhaps that's the best way moving forward, because it does increase the ability for us to, or maximizes the ability for us to be safer in terms of social distancing.
Yeah, I think the first thing that we need to ask is, why do we actually need to work outside of the home? When are the situations, or what are the jobs that actually require you to work outside of the home? So for this, we have three things. The first thing is high touch. So if you actually literally need to touch the person, then of course you need to be there. The second thing would be dependency. So if you are really interdependent and you are dependent on other people, then you probably need to be going to work. And the last thing is also self-sufficiency. Some people just can't work from home, just absolutely cannot work from home. They just find it impossible to get anything done because of the circumstances of the house and their personality as well. So I think after you're done with assessing these three things, the next most important thing would be then to also make sure that, so once you're clear, what are the jobs that entitle you to work from home and what are the jobs that don't, I think majority of it then should be, we are going to be permanently having an arrangement of work from home. The truth is, almost everything can be done from home unless you have these three criteria. So I would encourage definitely everybody else to follow not necessarily what PMB is doing, but to the best of their abilities of that.
Yeah, being an organizational psychologist, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with when it comes to personalities. And already when we go to a workplace, there are multiple personalities that we need to deal with. Some of them, jives with us, others are incongruent to a point where it's nuclear warfare already. I don't know whether things are going to be better or worse now, considering the pandemic dawning upon us. What would be some of your comments in terms of managing the different personalities under this new normal that we have right now?
Yeah, I don't think it changes. I think when it comes to relationships, it's always back to the basics. When it comes to managing people, whether if you can do it in person, you can definitely do it not in person as well, because human beings are based out of energy. Don't need physical touch to specifically be there. Some of the organizations that are doing this really, really well are basically just engaging more frequently with unique things, not frequently for the sake of doing it, but doing it quite uniquely. So they are exposing a lot of things that they never exposed themselves to before. Most of organizations, what they're doing is that they're having a lot of what Facebook has been doing for a very long time, which is just having town halls with Q&A. So never before have they met their CEOs, never before have they had conversation with their business leaders. They're just basically sitting down and having all of their questions. So they're having a lot of Q&A formats. They're having a lot of one-on-one conversations. But I totally, from my own understanding about what clients are going through, it is not easy. But it is not because it is work from home. It is because it is compounded together with the fact that this is with MCO. Work from home on its own has a lot of amazing benefits. But because this is compounded by MCO, we are having a lot of multiple issues. Having your children at home, having your old folks somewhere else, you can't visit them. Work from home on its own is great. No issues. It's excellent. There's a lot of research that says it actually increases productivity, helps you to even cut the salary of your employees because they're able to stay in more cheaper locations. But this is compounded with MCO. So I would just say that when it comes to dealing with personality, the one thing everybody should focus on is, what is your current fear? What are you afraid of right now that is making it difficult for you to relate to all of us? And what can I do for you? Or what can we do together? So I think, this whole period is really about going back down to basics and going deeper down with our relationships and connecting from a place that really makes sense rather than a place that is all about performance.
Sometimes it's plain and simple, actually. The fear of losing income. That's a huge deal, right? I mean, you can be, afraid of how others perceive you, afraid of your own sense of achievement not being fulfilled. All these other subjective issues, but sometimes it's as objective as that. I don't want to lose my income. And by working from home, that might offend my employer of some sort, I guess, to a certain level, and therefore, or I might be less favored as compared to my colleagues who are ready to risk themselves by coming to work and all that, and therefore, things get compounded. But at the end of the day, the most basic, the most carnal of all fears is income.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you
So,
think?
I think if you're really afraid of losing your job, then take responsibility for it. I'm not saying that, in order to have a job, you risk your life. That's not what I'm saying. If you're really, I think every single person should be responsible for their fears, or at least be educated. It's unfortunate not all of us are, but sit down and really weigh out your options and do something about it. But I think the last thing anyone should be doing is to stay in an organization and have a pendulum of fear going on within you. Say, am I going to lose my job? Am I not going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my job? Am I not going to lose my job? Ibrahim, when we ran a study 3 years ago and also 6 years ago, replicated a study, what we found out is that almost everybody already knew that they were going to lose their job when they lost their job. So if you already have that feeling, do something about it. The other good news is that in both of the studies that we've done, no matter how you feel about losing your job, within the next 6 months to a year, it is very likely that you will either find a job or that you will be fine, period. So this idea of losing your job is almost like any other fear. Yeah. And I think it's important to just face it and take responsibility for it. It's easier said than done. But it's better that you take responsibility for it rather than waiting for your employers to do something about it. But yes, if you feel that you're going to lose your job, then you probably are.
Well, it's sound advice actually, but it's not going to be easy. I'm speaking out of experience. I have lost my job once, many years ago. I thought I would crash and burn, die and all that. I mean, my firstborn was on the way and the kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right. Eventually, everything turns out okay. But at that point in time, retrospectively, I can laugh it off. But at that point in time, at that critical time, it's not that easy.
No, it's not. Ibrahim, can I ask you a question? Was that then a great time in your life? When you reflect back on it, does that constitute to one of the most amazing things that you did to show up for yourself?
Yeah, of course, because I come out stronger. My relationship with my wife became stronger, but it's like coming out of a fist fight. You won't die from a fist fight, but after a while you're like, that wasn't so bad. But actually going through it, that was just plain and horrible. And when we draw back to contemporary times, right now, unemployment is creeping up. In the US, 33 million people lost their jobs. In Malaysia, we're not nearly there, but the number is creeping up. Income is going to be squeezed. Everything is going to be problematic in terms of finding resources, opportunities, businesses, trying to find new clients. So the overall idea of things are going to be rosy is not going to be clean cut. People are still going to be expecting the worst. Because of this, do you think that it's okay or better because people are setting very low expectations of how things are going to be? That might navigate them by finding solutions better instead of being a little bit optimistic.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw back on what you have said because I think it's so powerful, and that's why we need more people to talk about having lost their jobs before. We need more people to talk about that experience so that anybody who might be losing their jobs can already make a prediction about what might happen to them and also their own happily ever after. So having people like you speak up about your experiences is so critical. And that's one of the reasons we've also set up a Facebook group where we're really encouraging people to talk about these things. One of the things as human beings that we know for sure is that we will die. Yet, when it happens, we are always shocked and we feel guilty, we feel all kinds of things. But it will happen. It's the same thing with job loss as well. In Malaysia, maybe it is a rarer thing. But in America, you would have one individual, like Ibrahim, you've gone through it once, one individual would have gone through it up to 5 times potentially in their life. Up to 5 times. So I think this is not about lowering your expectations. This is about taking on an experience and an exercise. It is very easy for me to sit here and talk about this because I come from a more privileged space. But I think that is the only way to take life experiences. That this is an experience And I'm going to try my level best to be able to talk about it with as many people and find as many opportunities. And one day, like a caterpillar, although I feel like I'm in a cocoon, I will have my butterfly story as well. I don't think there is a practical solution to anything. This has to be a philosophical understanding about what life is bringing to us at this point in time.
Yeah, but I'm afraid we have to draw this conversation to a close, but it was really an interesting conversation or chat to have with. That was Hetal Doshi. She is the CEO of O Psych. She is also the organizational psychologist, trying here to actually explain the situation of jobs and also the relationship between employers and employees. Hetal, if they want to learn more about your company or where to find you, where do they go about doing so?
Yeah, you can actually join us on our Facebook platform, Mental Health at Work, and just be part of the community to support each other. It's one of our initiatives to really get community support going. So yeah, please do connect on Facebook. Thank you, Ibrahim.
Fantastic. That was Hetal again. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astroawani.com. Look for Notepad over there. Plenty of interviews like this can be found over there. You can also watch this interview on your mobile devices. Just download the Astro Awani app wherever you get the application. Until next time, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.